Okay, so welcome everyone. My name's Dean Graham. I'm from Manningham City Council, so I'm an engagement officer within the emergency management department. So we're running a forum this evening with part of our emergency aware program. So welcome everyone. So I'd just like to do a quick acknowledgement of country first. So that Manningham Council acknowledges the Warrandyte people as the traditional custodians of the land, now known as Manningham. So we pay our respects to Wurundjeri elders past and present and value their ongoing contributions to our heritage and our community. So this evening, we're going to be covering a few topics. So the main points are bushfire prone areas. So if you hear the term BPA, that refers to a bushfire prone area. We'll be discussing fire mitigation works undertaken by council. So that's fire prevention works such as maintaining of parks, roadside trees, things of that nature. Then we'll have a speaker discussing about preparing for flood, fire and storm. So we'll have speakers from the SES and the CFA to give some expert advice on that. And then we'll go into council's role in emergency management. So that's part of the planning and the constant communication that we have with services. So in the event of an emergency, we do have a number of plans in place, and we'll go through all those roles. At the end, we have a Q&A. So that is, everyone is free to use the Q&A section to submit a question at any time. We're asking that though people can submit questions throughout, we'll be addressing them at the end. So we have all of our speakers available to address those questions. So we'll try to prioritize the most frequently asked questions as the ones that we'll be answering. And we'll be recording all the questions as well. So if we don't get an opportunity to answer the questions today or in our Q&A, we'll look to have them answered and published on our Emergency Aware site. So Emergency Aware, that's a program that we've also included on Manningham's main website now, where we've had statements and conversations, localized knowledge that's being provided by residents. So it will be a direct statement or a question, and then some information with emergency services resources embedded into that information to provide some clarity around that. So we'll be looking to keep that, expanding that, so that therefore we're answering people's questions, incorporating localized knowledge into the ongoing engagement processes. So the representation services that are represented this evening, so we've got Victoria Police, the Country Fire Authority, State Emergency Service, Fire Rescue Victoria, and Forest Fire Management Victoria. Also, we've got Dick Davies from the Warrandyte Community Association to also share some work, because they do a lot of great work in the preparedness space. So here is a map. So when I was speaking about the bushfire prone area, the BPA, so this is the map of the bushfire prone area. So it reflects, so you can see that approximately about half of the municipality is bushfire prone. So we can see there also has like the main river streams, that waterways that are going through as well. So this is ownership of the land. So we do a lot of works to maintain and try to do fire mitigation works for fuel loads. But as you can see here, the areas in the peach color, that's the public parks that Manningham overlooks and we try to maintain. Then we have publicly owned ownership, so it's other services such as forest fire management. They also look in the grey. And then as you can see, the majority of the fuel load is in green. That's on private property. So they're not maintained by any public land, so we don't have the permission to go in and start maintaining that. So that's why we're really highlighting the importance of having to maintain properties and keep an eye on fuel loads on private property, because the majority of the land in Manningham is within private property. So council fuel mitigation works. So as you can see here, that's one of the picture with one of our parks team. So we undertake electric line clearance in high risk areas. We do electric line clearance audits. We undertake hazard tree inspections along access roads. And then we work in conjunction with power authorities and Energy Safe Victoria to ensure tree clearances. So this is done on a proactive and responsive manner. So being as we have that all in place to do it, but we have, if anyone from the public wants to report tree or anything of concern, or overhanging a main road or something, then that would initiate a reactive process for us to go out and look at that as well. So you can see here we have roadside slashing, verge mowing throughout bushfire risk areas. So a lot of works that will be done is clearance of like tall grass in reserves, hazardous nature strips, cut them to be fire ready, fine fuel reduction work. So that's important, because if you see in a reserve like a large tree that's fallen over, a lot of the times the larger risk will be the more finer fuels like tree barks and leaf litter and things that are built up. That would be more of a risk than just say like a single large tree that's fallen on its own. So I've actually been advised in the past that they actually can be a good little habitat for some native animals, some of those trees. And then we have closing of bushland reserves on days of total fire ban, and then cutting fire breaks and maintenance of those fire breaks. So a fire break is if you have trees and vegetation and then property, so we're trying to have like a bit of a space, so if there is a fire that doesn't continuously reach all the way to property. So we do that in our reserves. We do an annual fire prevention on private land inspection program. So that's carried out with the local laws team. So it's about 1,300 private parcels of vacant land that are inspected to see if they've got any large excess of fuel, long grass or things of that nature. So that's annually proactive and reactive, in that we have those 1,300 properties that we would look, but it's also a reactive process. So if there is a property that is of some concern, and times there can be people who own it and they'll call up because they want to get some guidance, so they can you can notify council if there's a property of concern that's your neighbour. Sometimes people who actually own the properties themselves will come to us and want some help. So with that inspection process, council will then work with the landowners to see if we have various ways of working with those landowners to try to reduce those fuel loads that are present in there to get that down. So, and again, we can see why that's so important, because the map that was displayed earlier, the clear majority of the fuel loads are located in private property. And those inspections are all conducted by trained local laws officers. We also do, the environment team does the Woody Weed Hotspots program. So that was 12 privately owned properties participated this year. So that's woody weeds to try to stop them from spreading across into other private property across. So all those properties receive woody weed control throughout the experienced local contractors. And then, dual benefits of reducing the spread to other private properties and public reserves as well. So we have garden waste disposal days coming up. So because of the COVID-19 crisis, we've been unable to have a recycling centre operational. So what we're trying to do is, while it's still closed at this time, and we're looking to open soon, but in the interim, we won't have that service of helping people in bushfire-prone areas maintain their properties. So that would be what we're doing in Saturday, or the next weekends coming up. So Saturday, Sunday for the next preceding weekends in various locations, we're going to have skip bins located so you can come and dispose of green waste. So you won't even have to exit your vehicles. We'll have workers there to take the green waste and put it into the skip bins on your behalf. And but bookings are essential. So if you wanted to find out more information on where you can access that service and where the bins will be located, we've got a link here at the bottom of the screen, you can see. And so we encourage everyone to utilize that. And we'll keep people up to date when we can return back to post-COVID, and we all hope that will come soon. So I'll be handing off to Chris Vassos, so for Forest Fire Management Victoria. So he'll basically, he'll give a summary of the good work that they do also in far as fuel mitigation. So Chris.
Thanks, Dean. Good evening, everyone. So my name's Chris Vassos. I'm the Ranger in Charge Fire and Emergency for Parks Victoria, and I represent Forest Fire Management Victoria within the city of Manningham. So Forest Fire Management Victoria is made up of agencies from DELP, Parks Victoria, Melbourne Water, Vic Forests, and Department of Digital. I think they've got a new name now. And basically we fall under the umbrella and deliver fire management works across the state. So within Manningham, we have a network of fuel breaks which have been strategically identified within the landscape. So using Phoenix Fire modelling, these fuel breaks are placed to give the best break-in fuel, hence their name, to allow the opportunity to slow the progress of fire and allow for direct attack either by ground crews or aircraft and so on. We deliver fuel management works, which is recorded on the Joint Fuel Management Plan, which is all available on some web links which we can provide. So within the Warrandyte area, it's predominantly along the public land along there, as you saw from the slide previously, is a pretty thin linear strip, and the fuel management works we do on the JFMP is predominantly non-burn fuel treatment. We do a lot of mechanical mulching using large machines and so on, and there's also the annual slashing of the fuel breaks. But we do undertake planned burning within the municipality, within our patch. We were burning up at St Andrews today, which was a good day for it. And we have a couple of burns scheduled in Warrandyte, one at Webb Street and one at Pindari, which are sort of in the asset protection zones. But yeah, with the risk modelling and with the mechanical treatment that we undertake and the burning, we make sure we minimise the risk of potential from the land that we manage. With the JFMP, the fuel management program, it's moved away from a hectare target. Post Royal Commission Black Saturday, Forest Fire Management was required to deliver, I think it was 230,000 hectares of land, or 5% of public land had to be treated, which you can see on the dot point there. So in 2016, they moved away from that and went to a more targeted risk approach. So treating fuel, rather than just accumulating hectares out in the bush in the middle of nowhere, we treat the fuel around the assets. So wherever the risk is, that's where we'll target our fuel treatments, whether it's non-burn treatment or fuel management, or burn, sorry. So with that fuel break network, we have 1,000 kilometres of fuel breaks around regional Melbourne. That's just within the Melbourne region. These fuel breaks are slashed annually. Because we have 1,000 kilometres, we have to wait for the grass to cure, dry, cut it once before summer, and then it won't grow back basically for the duration of the summer period. We don't have the resources to cut 1,000 kilometres worth of fuel breaks multiple times, so we wait till it cures before summer and treat it once. We have a fire base based at Pound Bend, as you well know. So there's a Parks Victoria depot there, and the FFM Vic fire base is there. We've got a Unimog heavy tanker, 4 slip-on units, and we have a number of crew there. And it's on particularly bad days, we stand up crews. We have crews sitting there waiting to respond to incidents. That's what the other thing I want to mention for the local people, Pound Bend visitor nodes, like on days of severe fire danger, we close a number of visitor sites like Jumping Creek, Coonong, Norman's Reserve, but Pound Bend has been left open, and historically we can't work out why, because it's a high visitation site and equal amount of risk. So decision's been made that will now be closed on days of severe or greater. We don't want to encourage public from visiting high-risk areas, so that site will be closed, and we'll be seeking assistance from the other agencies to manage traffic and so on. It'll also provide the ability for appliances from all agencies to respond to any sort of emergency there. I think that's about my time up, Dean. That's all I've got. Happy to take questions later on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, and our next speaker will have a member of the State Emergency Service, so the controller of the Manningham unit. So we'll introduce Vincent.
Thank you very much for that, Dean. And yep, flip over the slide. Yes, so Vincent Ciardulli, I'm the controller for the Manningham unit. So for those of you who might not know, the SES, we're a volunteer agency, and our key areas is supporting people with storm and flood events and community in that area. So I just want to cover a few points tonight about how you can prepare yourselves for the upcoming potential of flood and storm, but also ongoing beyond this current season as well. So critical for around that is part is maintaining your roof. So keeping your gutters clean. So I'm sure the CFA will speak about clean gutters. So that's both from fire prevention, but also from potential flooding and building damage through rain. Part of the gutters is also checking that the spouting and downpipes are clear and flowing. So not just looking that the gutters themselves are empty, but the downpipes and the water is flowing throughout the downpipes there. While you're looking at your roof, just inspecting if you can see loose tiles, broken tiles. You may see ridge cappings and cement that needs replacing. So now's the time to inspect those things and ensure that they're secured in the event of a storm and flood wind events that may occur. Classically, what we see during large wind events is things being blown around in yards. Trampolines, everyone's seen on the news services blown around. So either secure and tie them down, or if possible, bring them indoors where that's possible, so they don't become hazards in the event of a wind event that occurs. Really critical is about talking to your neighbours, families and friends. Have you got a plan if something goes wrong, unintended? Do you know what your neighbours are going to do in the event? How can you support each other? So in our Manningham SES unit, we've got about 30 members that can respond and go and help 130,000 residents. So your best help may be next door. We'll get there when we can, but as you'll see in an upcoming slide, when these storms hit, they often impact many, many people at once, which minimises the chance of us getting to in the time that you would hope. So have your plans in place with your neighbours and friends early. One really critical message, because unfortunately we see this every time flooding occurs, flash flooding, is people driving or heading through floodwaters. Really encourage you, never drive, walk or ride through floodwaters. You don't know what's up beneath the water. It may be contaminated with sewage, sharp objects. There may be things, so as much as we escape the water, so does our native wildlife as well. So critically, please do not enter floodwaters in those circumstances, stay clear. Jump onto the next.
Yep. Sorry, just one moment.
Yep. And so you may recall, having glanced at this back in January of this year, we had a very significant hailstorm and wind event that occurred in January. In that, over 268 requests for assistance within Manningham itself were made. And so that's just the point of, with 30 members, we did call in extra resources from other areas, but often with these wind and storm events, there's multiple areas they hit. So that preparation you do beforehand is critical to minimise the number of those requests that come in if you can self-sustain yourself, and even better prevent those issues occurring. So what you're looking for there is what will be the impact of heavy rain, what would be the impact of hail, and with that heavy rain, what might flash flooding look like in your area. So if you know you've got a courtyard, an area of your property that always is impacted by floodwaters or heavy rain, is there anything you can do now to alleviate that? Is there drainage works that you can take on, making sure the drains are clear? So it's all those things to enact now and being prepared. One item to prepare for is availing yourself to some sandbags. So equipping yourself with sandbags, we recommend around 25 sandbags at a household. If you need to shore up a doorway and protect the doorway from floodwaters entering, or divert water away from an area you don't want the water to enter. So equipping yourself with those items now would be critical. And so why are we really concerned this year? So at the moment, November and January is looking likely to see above average rainfall, which is what we've seen all year. So our grounds are saturated at this point in time, not willing to take up much more soaking of water, which puts them into our catchments. There's a La Nina is underway in the tropical Pacific at the moment. We've seen Queensland already impacted by this with some flooding in that area there. And so this is likely to increase to above average rainfalls across much of Australia, as you can see by the graphic on screen. And if you look at the shading, what that means for Metro Melbourne is we're looking at a 70% likelihood of having above average rainfall. And as we've already received above average all year, that's leading to the high probability of us seeing flooding events occur. And the forecasts are that they could be potentially like we had back in 2010, which were quite significant floods. For your own information, really encourage you to access the Manningham SES Local Flood Guide. It's available through the SES website and also through the Manningham Council website as well. I'll try and pop a link up in the Q&A section later so you can link through to it. But in there, you'll see the likely areas that are impacted by flash flooding and floods and riverine flooding. And you can see how your home and your area that you live in may be impacted by them as well. So that's a great resource, and also tools about to reinforce the preparedness messages about what you can do to make your home minimise the risk of flooding and storm damage from events. Thanks very much. I look forward to Q&A when we can hopefully answer some of your questions.
Cool. Thank you so much, Vincent. That's excellent. So up next, we have Aaron Farr, who's captain of the Wonga Park Brigade from the CFA.
Thanks, Dean. Hi, everyone. Welcome. As Dean said, I'm Aaron Farr. I'm the captain of Wonga Park CFA. Just noticed in the chat too, the Honourable Ryan Smith. I'll do it verbally rather than just in the chat. So on behalf of the panellists, I'd like to welcome Ryan. So welcome, Ryan. Now, as you'd be aware, there's 3 CFA brigades within the Manningham catchment, or council area, should I say, Wonga Park, Warrandyte and South Warrandyte. Obviously supported by FRV, and we support FRV as well. So that's mutual. Now, the main thing I'm going to speak about tonight is about preparing your property. We mention it every year. It's the same message, but the message is there and repetitive for a reason. It can be the difference between life and death, and it can be the difference between saving your property or not. So really, the message is to make sure that you leave early. But even if you plan on leaving early and you think you're going to be out regardless, the best thing that you can do is prepare your property. And the reason for that is twofold. Essentially, firstly, it may mean that your property survives on the basis that you did that prep work, because if you don't, I would be putting money on the basis that it may not be standing when you return. And secondly, obviously, the second component being that obviously if you are caught out, because it might be a day that you didn't expect or it's above your trigger, and I'll talk about that in a minute, it gives you more protection, if you will, to be able to remain at that property. So even if you plan to leave early, make sure you do prepare. Now, just some simple things, as you'll see on the slide, and I could talk about this all night, but I'll keep it short. Essentially, keep your grass cut, and generally we say less than 10 centimetres. Gutters, as Vincent referred to before, keep your gutters clear of leaf litter. That's obviously to assist reduction of ember attack, and obviously getting under the eaves in the roof space, which is one of the main areas that embers can cause your house to catch fire. Cut back branches and overhanging buildings. Obviously, that's vital. Not only do you have the component of the ember attack or the flame travelling up the tree, but you've also got the chance that tree will fall. Trees are very good at falling over once they're impacted by fire. In fact, quite regularly, the fatality that occurs during or after a fire is days later when the tree does collapse, and that can sometimes cause that fatality. So just bear in mind that's almost as important as the actual fire itself, or preparing for that fire to impact on the day. Get rid of any dry grass, leaves, twigs, or any loose bark. So really it's just clean up anything that's a fuel loading that's there. It shouldn't be there. Try and get rid of it. Keep it down to a minimal level. And obviously store flammable liquids and wood piles away from the house. So just make sure that you do that and move them away. We all have a large wood pile in front of the, under the carport or near the house, so it's easy to grab in the middle of winter without trekking out in the rain. Not good around summer. You're just essentially adding a fuel load right next to the building, which is likely to catch fire if you do come under ember attack or direct flame attack. And obviously that's essentially going to penetrate the house pretty quickly. So on to the next one. I'll just check my notes here. Alrighty, so the fire danger ratings are very important for the public to be aware of. Now, the fire danger rating, I see it as, and it's probably not necessarily the party line, but how hard is a fire to stop on these types of days is really the general view that I give it. You look, for example, on a code red day, even if we jump on it very, very quickly, the reality is that the weather that's there and all of the aspects that go towards a fire, and I won't go into fire science, but all of those aspects essentially mean that that fire is probably unstoppable before we even get to it. Obviously, there are some fires that we can, but then you look at a low to moderate. Most, as an extreme example, most of those fires we can jump on and pretty much put out before there's any major damage done. So that's sort of your key and your understanding as to how bad that day is when it comes to the fire danger, which is vital for what you decide to do. Now, obviously, I'm just going through the slide as well. It's based on weather and other environmental conditions such as fuel loads, which I touched on. You need to have your survival plans. So the key here is that you need to think about what your trigger is. So you might have a plan where, and I'll talk about the plans in a minute, but you might have a plan whereby you say, on a certain day, I'm not going to be there because I'm not going to put myself or my family at risk. You've got to decide what that trigger is. Now, obviously, you'll pick one of those ratings, and I do have a personal opinion on which ones would be appropriate, but generally, it is up to you to do your own investigation and take your own view as to your property and everything else to decide what your trigger actually is. It might be you say on a very high day, I'm not going to be there. On a severe day, I'm not going to be there. Anything above that, I'd say you're probably less conservative. But definitely code red extreme, I'd be suggesting that you definitely wouldn't want to be there. So you've got to think about your trigger, and it might be differing parts of your plan. So I'll talk about that shortly, but you might say, I'm not there on that day, or alternatively, you know, we put steps in motion to protect everyone in our household and possibly our neighbours. So I think I've covered that, Dean. Excellent, thank you. Alrighty, so really the key point from tonight from the CFA is that leaving early is the safest option to protect yourself and your family. I can't stress that enough. If you're not there, reality is you can't be impacted by the fire. Leaving early, the key point to that though is we're not talking about, oh, there's a fire coming over the ridge, I think I might jump in the car and drive. That's not leaving early, that is too late. And for those that live in the fire danger area, just go out and drive in the afternoon at 3 o'clock and have a look at the school traffic. Do you think when every single person is leaving their house at the same time, you're actually going to be able to get out of there? I'd suggest you're going to be stuck on a road, surrounded by trees, grass, whatever it might be, and you're probably not going to get far because it's going to be peak hour and absolutely packed. So leaving early is leaving early. It's the morning of, early in the morning, or preferably the night before. So you're not here on the day at all, because as we've seen with a number of the large fires, they can occur at any point in the day, even as early as sunrise. So just be aware of that. It avoids panic, avoids you being trapped, as I mentioned, for example, getting stuck on the road, and obviously. Generally, and I'm not a psychologist, but what we hear about the psychological component is people panic. They make irrational decisions. They don't think clearly. And by doing that, they might decide to jump in the car and drive down a certain way, which puts them more at risk. So we don't make clear choices when we're in danger and when we're stressed, particularly in these emergency scenarios. So essentially, the comment would be just to be out of there early, as I said, and talk to your family and friends, because if they don't hear from you on a day that might be a total fire ban or extreme, severe, whatever it might be, they're going to be quite concerned. So let them know when you plan to leave, so they've got a bit of peace of mind themselves, because it's always good to make sure those around you and those that are looking out for you are aware that you're okay, you made a decision and you've acted on your plan. Just some comments on the slide. Plan to leave early, meaning know when you'll leave, as I said, night before or the morning of, early. Organise where you'll go. Don't just jump on the road and start driving, because I guarantee you'll end up coming home because you won't have anywhere to go to. Plan your route. Think about it. You know, you've got school traffic. What if you're leaving the morning of and there's already a whole avalanche of people trying to get out? Look at your options. You always try and have a few, I'll call them escape routes, as we call them, to make sure you can get out and you're avoiding traffic. What will you do before you go? So it might be fill your gutters, and there's a million of these that I can mention, but some examples are fill your gutters, start sweeping up that last bit of leaf litter near the door, pulling in your doormats that are inside, doing a walk around the house and a number of things. If you've got animals, for example, horses, cattle, whatever it might be, you need to have a plan for them as well. And we can talk about that later in general questions if anyone has any questions on that. And also know when it's safe to return home. So it might be waiting for the emergency services or an announcement on the ABC to let you know that it is safe to return home. You don't just come home, because you might either not get home, you might encounter roadblocks, or alternatively, you'll be sitting on the side of the road because the trees come down, you're unable to actually access the road to get home. So just be aware of that, and don't come home too soon. At the end of the day, your family's health and safety are number one, above and beyond any property. We can replace property, but we want to look after yourselves. So on to the next slide. Thanks, Dean. Thank you. And the other thing we want to cover is a fire survival planning kit. So I mentioned the plan. You need to have a plan. It's all good and well for us to have a chat over the dinner table and say, oh, those bad days, I'm just going to leave early. Yep, yeah, the night before sounds all right, or the morning of. That's not going to achieve absolutely anything, because when the day arrives, you don't know what you're doing. You haven't got a plan. You're unsure as to who's leaving. Is your husband or wife going to work? Are you taking the day off and you're going to go elsewhere? What is the plan? It needs to be documented. It needs to be written down. And I stress, you should practice your plans. It's no point having it written down, because on the day or the day before, you're not really going to know what you're doing. Practice it, and particularly when there's children involved, make sure they're involved in that planning, or at least in that practicing and knowing what they need to do, because it might be that that you're not able to communicate that to them on the day. They need to know beforehand. I've mentioned the practice plan. So write down your fire survival plan. There's heaps of brochures and guides that you can get from the CFA. So Taryn could assist with that, or your local CFA, obviously. Share your plan with your family, friends and neighbours. Obviously, I mentioned that before. That's important. Practice your plan, I mentioned, and put together an emergency kit. So beware that when there is an emergency such as a bushfire, you are going to lose power. You're probably going to lose water, because we're going to be pumping every single drop we can get out of the mains. You might not have a petrol-powered pump, or preferably a diesel-powered pump. So you might not have a number of these things. Once you lose power, you lose your radio. You can't charge your phone. If you've got an antenna, for example, in your property, you'll lose your telecommunications possibly as well. NBN runs off power. So beware, you're pretty much going to be in the dark as soon as you lose that power. So, it might be, and there's in the photo, you can see a number of things: a battery powered radio, and a number of other components such as torches, and obviously there's all the other components such as protective gear, first aid kits, take your medication, your title, your wills, anything like that. And again, we can go into that later. It's not an exhaustive list, it's just some examples. And obviously have a backup plan. So you might have planned to leave, but for whatever reason you didn't, you got caught up, you had to duck home for something, which you should never do, but if you do, because you're not thinking clearly on that day, then you should have that backup plan. What are you going to do if you get caught at home? Or the biggest example is, it was below your trigger day. Your trigger was, say, severe, and it was below that, so you didn't enact your plan, but you got caught at home because there was a locally started fire. What are you going to do? What's your backup plan say? Because otherwise you're in the dark, you're not going to know what you're going to be doing. So I'm happy to take questions. I see some have come in the Q&A, I haven't read them, but I'm happy to take questions when we get to the end. I think I've covered everything, Dean. Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That was really great. Okay, next, well, I'd like to introduce Steve Mole. So he is from Fire Rescue Victoria, and to introduce the service. So over to Steve.
Good, thanks, Dean, and thanks for having on this panel, and good opportunity to talk about the new service. So I'm the what I call Community Safety Commander for the Eastern District of Melbourne, including the good people of Manningham. What I'd like to just briefly touch on tonight is the new service, the new fire service that come into being on the 1st of July. What happened on the 1st of July, the FRV legislation came into being, which saw all of the career staff from the CFA and all the career staff from what was the Metropolitan Fire Brigade come across to the new fire service. The CFA now is, at that time also became a volunteer-only service. So just a little bit of background about how this came about. In the last decade, there's been about 8 different government reviews that have all recommended the modernisation of the state's fire services. Both organisations are collectively over 100 years old. And as, of course, we all know, Melbourne is a very different place now to what it was when the boundaries between the two services were put in place. So there's about 8 different independent reviews that recommended these changes. So as I said, from July the 1st, the Fire Rescue Victoria was launched, which brought together all the MFB and CFA career firefighters. So what that meant effectively for people like myself in the Metropolitan Fire Brigade previously is that suddenly the service basically doubled in size. So Fire Rescue Victoria now operates 85 stations across the state. And of course, we still support the volunteer firefighter organisations as they currently stand. So as part of the new service, there was a panel, an independent fire district panel established. The idea is that they'll every 4 years review the current boundaries just to make sure that the services that both Fire Rescue Victoria and Country Fire Authority, the services they operate, can still fit still appropriate to the boundaries and the population. As you say, as I'm sure we all know, is that Melbourne is a very different place to what it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago, and of course is a very a fast-growing population, very different demographic now. We have a much more concentrated population. We have a very diverse population. We have some significant industry and what we consider to be significant risks within the metropolitan Melbourne. So what it really means for the people of Manningham and most of the people in Melbourne, they won't really see a significant difference in terms of the service delivery. There's still some things, as you can imagine, when you amalgamate 2 organisations that have both been in existence for over 100 years. There's still some things, that we have to work through. And of course, this all come about during the COVID restrictions as well. So it's been a little bit of a tricky beginning. But I think for most Victorians, they will see a fairly seamless change to the new organisation. So now we operate mainly in the regional centres. So we have cover areas like Geelong and Ballarat, Bendigo, up to Mildura, Shepparton, Albury, Wodonga. So in those major regional centres, Fire Rescue Victoria now is the primary response agency. As I said, we still need, and we need Country Fire Authority support. Just having assets in those areas also does, we still rely on them. And we still need to work together, 2 organisations, as we have done in the past. So look, that's probably all I really wanted to cover tonight. Aaron did a great job in covering all the risks and some of the things that you need to do just to protect yourself coming up in the fire season. And of course, I would echo his comments. So I'll keep it fairly brief. So if anybody's certainly got any questions, I look forward to answering them. Great,
Thank you
thanks,
very much. Cool, thank you very much, Steve. Okay, over next we will have Ben Middleton. So he is the coordinator of the emergency management team, and he was going to discuss more council's role within an emergency. So over to Ben.
Thank you there, Dean. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Ben Middleton. I'm the emergency management coordinator at Manningham Council. I'll be speaking about council's role in emergency management, as well as addressing some of the questions gathered from last year's Be Ready Warrandyte Community Forum. So I'll also be around as well as part of the panel for the group later on this evening. So I guess addressing the question of council's role in emergency management is a complex one. There's a lot that we do in this space, and it's not just my department that works on that. There's multiple departments within Manningham Council that have a emergency management function or remit as part of our preparedness. So therefore, in an effort to keep it simple and easy to follow, I've broken the role into 5 components of emergency management, which you can see on the screen. The components are listed in the diagram on the slide, and I'll address each component as I go through. So I'll start with the one in green, and it's probably, one of the most important that we do as a collective in the emergency management sector, and that's planning and preparedness. And as this is crucial to all the other 4 components to ensure an effective emergency management sector as well. And it's also, I guess, thankfully, the most often that we operate in as an entity and as a collective. So one of council's core responsibilities is to establish and maintain an effective and engaged Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee, also known as a MEMPC. We work regularly with a broad range of stakeholders to produce and maintain what we call an Municipal Emergency Management Plan, also known as MEMP. You can see this on the front page of the slides there, just to the right. This overarching plan details the procedures for mitigation and associated relief and recovery arrangements within Manningham. And this is open to the public. You can find it on our website in the emergency management section. And I've just included the link there on the slides in red below. So another key aspect of planning and preparedness is to continually rehearse our arrangements through exercises and increase our awareness of emergency plans through training. This is core to embedding our arrangements across organisations, and as I say, this is a multi-agency entity for which we as council assist in that coordination and bring those partner agencies together. And just an example of that, actually, on Thursday this week, Manningham Council will be getting together with our EM support staff alongside the emergency services in a virtual sense, unfortunately, at a regional exercise. And that's where we will test a new style of exercise for emergency relief centre procedures. We'll listen to some guest speakers as well on related topics, all with the aim of building our knowledge on providing support to the community following emergencies. So preparedness also includes close collaboration across organisations, both locally, regionally, encouraging those positive working relationships. This includes partnering with community groups as well, and you'll hear from one of our community groups later on today. And this all helps to inform agency plans and in effect build community resilience, which becomes ever more important, particularly to emergencies and disasters that may happen in Manningham. And just one of the examples of which we do this is through coordinating forums like this one. And so being part of the community-led forums is also part of that, for which we did last year and we hope to do going forward. Manningham Council have a hard-working emergency management team. We currently consist of nearly 4 full-time staff. Preparation, response and recovery for agencies requires much more than just my team of 4, which again is another reason why we rely so much on the agencies and our partners and that close engagement. And that's just a great asset that we've got the guys here today as well to help us with that. And so it's important that not only that we engage with the public, but also private and voluntary sectors as well. So if I move on to prevention and mitigation. So council in this, council's responsibility in this phase, you'll have heard much of the information around that from Dean's section at the start of this seminar. However, just a few more to add, and I guess and to include that we're heavily involved in, I guess, the land use and planning and the regulation around all of that, which does have obviously an impact on the community and ensures that we practice safe planning and regulations in that space. We ensure things like buildings are compliant to building standards and codes, the development and maintenance of flood mitigation. So I guess examples of that are levees, retarding basins and drainage. We have a drainage team that get involved in ensuring that flood waters or heavy rains are able to be directed away from areas and to other spaces. And so identification of hazards as well, those risks, and then to also ensure that any of those risks that we identify, we work together as a collective and also within Manningham to ensure that there are treatments for those risks. So moving on to the next area, which is response. Now, councils have a support role in response, but this support role often overlaps into the relief phase. And so generally is through providing resources to the emergency services. And an example of this is that we would ensure that there's a provision of these council resources available at the scene of an incident or following a request from response agencies. So we have what's called a MIMO, so trained municipal emergency management officers who are on standby to assist the coordination of this resource provision. So that could be things like transport, machinery, temporary accommodation and other things as well. In terms of response, there's also, or response/relief, there's also building surveyors for which we have use of, and they are to survey and determine the occupancy of damaged buildings, often called to when there's either a car into a building or if there's a house fire as well. We have environmental health officers who are there to provide specialist advice on those emergency facilities and activities that may affect health outcomes as well. And then we also have roles and procedures in place for municipal emergency coordination at a local level. So this could be defined as whether it's a defined space to get the people in the room, and I'm sure it's the guys and girls that are in the panel today. So we'd get together as a municipal emergency coordination group, and we would look to understand what each other are doing at a local level. And obviously with the COVID lens at the moment, a lot of that is virtual. So there's also an aspect of our work that looks at a provision for space for the gathering of mass of emergency service trucks. These are known as staging areas. And then we also assist, particularly VicPol, in the implementation of road closures and diversions following any incidents. And so once the threat from the risk as part of that response phase begins to subside and release activities for those impacted can begin, this brings us into that other component of relief. a bit more closely. And so municipal councils are responsible for the coordination of local level relief activities. And we're the lead agency for provision of information, or let's say local relief information, to the public and the media, establishing and managing emergency relief centres, for which Stuart Henderson from Victoria Police will speak to a little moment shortly. I think it's straight after me. Arranging emergency accommodation for displaced households, and providing that much needed personal support and counselling referrals if needed. And finally, there's a recovery component. And so Manningham Council are responsible for the coordination of local level recovery activities. So forming municipal recovery committees as part of that, and supporting community-led recovery committees also. We may look to establish a recovery centre to provide that important information to the impacted community. And then there's also the overseeing of and redevelopment of impacted areas, for which we start to understand once we undertake assessments of our assets and understand the true impact of what the emergency and or disaster has given us. And so finally, I'd like to, I guess, just say this, and that's that the great collaboration between the agencies and the community all year round in Manningham is a testament to the resilience building activities that take place, and to ensure residents remain safe and prepared throughout the year.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben. So up next, we'll have Stuart Henderson from Victoria Police. So he is to give some information on emergency relief centres.
Okay, thank you, Dane. In emergency management, there are a lot of acronyms, and you've probably heard many of them tonight. And for people who use them all the time, that becomes our business and we know them. But for people who are not used to emergency management, it can get a bit confusing, and people hear terms like ERC or emergency relief centres, and they're not really sure what that actually looks like or what does that mean. One of the key words you've probably heard throughout most speakers tonight is the word plan. And as Ben was pointing out, a lot of our planning goes all year round. We don't wait till the fire season to start planning. Well, our planning is all year round. In the depths of winter, we're planning. And part of that planning is what do we do following an emergency? Or a lot of people think that an emergency finishes once the fire is out, but that's only half of the story. And a lot of people can be displaced, need to go somewhere safe. We provide somewhere safe for them to be, but the reality is that they may not be able to return home for days even after a bushfire situation. So that's what a relief centre is. It's not a designated building. We don't have a designated building within Manningham called the Relief Centre. It's a description or a description of a building or an area that council, along with other emergency managers, have decided is a very safe location by which we can get people to and we can start the relief process. But that doesn't always mean that we're always going to have one of these. The question's raised, well, who gets to decide when an emergency relief centre is opened? When in an emergency, there's an emergency management team who, when they make a decision that we need to evacuate people from a dangerous area to a safe area, that becomes the responsibility of Victoria Police. Victoria Police is responsible for managing evacuations. We don't make the decision on our own to evacuate. We do that in consultation with the people who are running the incident. But also through that consultation and our relationships we have with the council is when we then speak to council and say, this is what we want and this is what we need right now for these people. And the council comes on board and helps us and assists us in the process of that. Now, we have a number of different locations because we don't know where the emergency is going to be. We don't know the scale of the emergency. We just have to plan for an emergency. Now, not all emergencies are going to require a relief centre. But if we get to the stage where we do need one, then we consult with council, and we have a number of different venues that are suitable for a number of different reasons, and then we will communicate that to the public where that's going to be. So what are you likely to find at an emergency relief centre? Unfortunately, you're not going to find the Hilton. It's going to be like everything in emergency. It's going to be set up very quickly and with the bare minimum of resources, because the purpose of it is to make people safe. It's not going to be to provide luxury tea and coffee facilities and all those things. That may come later. But the purpose of a relief centre is to make sure our people are safe and then start the process of identifying who has been displaced and then start planning on how we're going to get people to go back into the areas from which they've been displaced. Manningham has 5 locations we've identified as key areas. Now, it can get a little confusing for people because when they hear a relief centre, then they also hear the term neighbourhood safer places. And some people may think, is this the same thing or is this not? That's another acronym. I'll go on to now and explain what a neighbourhood safer place is. You may have seen signs around as you go walking the dog and you go, I wonder what that is. Oh, Bushfire neighbourhood safer place. Well, that might be a great location to go to if we do get a fire. Let me explain that a neighbourhood safer place is a place of essentially last resort. If you get caught out, we have identified that this is a safe place where you can go and be relatively safe from radiant heat. It's not going to be a place that everyone should go to. As was explained earlier, in your planning, if you need to leave the area, leave early and make sure you've got a plan of where you go to. If you leave the area in your King G shorts, you may very well be in your King G shorts for a couple of days unless you plan to take stuff with you. So if you're planning to just go to the neighbourhood safer place, it's going to be a place which is safe from radiant heat, but there's not going to be a lot of other facilities there. A lot of people would like to go just outside the area, keep an eye on the situation and return. You may find in a bushfire situation that you aren't able to return until the area is rendered safe. This could be days. So in your planning, make sure you pack enough stuff, pack extra clothes, pack jumpers. I know it may be a really hot day, but it may get colder later, there may be changes. These are the sort of things that you need to think about. And but we do have plans around these neighbourhood safer places. Victoria Police is committed over summer to provide resources to Manningham for the duration of summer. We call it Operation Safeguard. And a lot of that is going about looking at prevention, education, but also too, we want to have police available at short notice should a situation arise. Because not only are we responsible for the evacuation of people, but we also manage traffic management points. Because what we want to do is we want to get the emergency services to the emergency as quick as we can, and we want to keep people out of a dangerous area and render it safe. So that's what essentially the traffic management points are. And as we heard before, in an emergency, people do get a little panicked and their driving may not be their best driving that they've done. We understand that, but we want to do it so everybody can leave in an orderly fashion without causing a more dangerous situation to other road users. Again, I just want to echo what everybody else has been saying here tonight. Planning is key. If you don't know the answers, then maybe you seek out experts, seek out other people in your area who may have plans and learn from others. But ultimately, you have to make the decision what's going to be suitable for you and where you're going to go. Thanks, Dean.
Cool. Thank you so much. Okay, so up next we have Dick Davies from the Warrandyte Community Association.
Hi, Dean. Hello, everybody. I'm the chairman of the Be Ready Warrandyte campaign, which was actually set up after the big fires in 2009, really to have a community response in conjunction with the emergency services. And we particularly concentrated on community awareness and particularly on fire planning. We've heard a lot about planning tonight from Aaron and everybody else, and latterly from Stuart. And what we've tried to do is to capture a lot of these resources on the Warrandyte Community Association website, which is there. You can access it on warrandyte.org.au. And if you go to the Be Ready Warrandyte arrow and just press that, or press the Bushfire link, you'll see a whole heap of different information, which is summarized here. This isn't the actual website itself, but it's a summary. Now, when we started out, the first thing that we did after the fires was to have a survey of how many people have a fire plan, do they know about fire plans, and this sort of thing. And two things came out of it. One is that there was, first of all, a very kind of half-baked attitude towards what people might do, and I think you've heard a little bit about that from some of the other speakers. And the other thing was gender dysfunction, that there was a strong difference of opinion between the male and the female in the family. The males obviously wanted to stay and fight, and the female might want to, the wife and children might want to leave. And this was something that came out. So we made a video in conjunction with the Warrandyte Theatre Company, and that's up on the web screen on the website, and it's called "Do You Have a Fire Plan?" It's a parody. It pokes fun. It went viral. It's won prizes, but it does have a very strong and important message at the end. And if you haven't seen it before, I would urge you to have another look. And it's one of the little gems from the Warrandyte Theatre Company. Now, if you want to know a little bit about fire planning, then you can look at What's the Plan? And if you click that, there's a number of links. One, these are checklists which we've developed in conjunction with the CFA, and these are specifically oriented towards Warrandyte and the Greater Warrandyte area. And it covers things like what do you look for if you're living alone, or if you've got children, or if you've got pets, or whatever. And there's different suggestions there, and that fits in very well with all of the information that Aaron was talking about from the CFA. Now, Ben, when he introduced the program, talked about the scenario that we ran last year in November, and this was a bushfire scenario for Warrandyte. It was presented by Joff Manders, who some of you may know. Joff is a local identity. He was also a commander in the what was then the Metropolitan Fire Brigade. And Steve Pascoe, who is Steve is a fire consultant who'd worked in fire consultancy and fire prevention for 30 years. Nevertheless, he still lost his house in the fires. And they made a very good presentation in the scenario, and they were ably assisted by Stuart Henderson, who we've just heard. And if you missed that presentation, you can get it on the link at Be Ready Warrandyte, and the link is shown there. It comes up on PowerPoint, and if you've got a presenter view on it, you can read the script alongside the slides. If you haven't got that facility on PowerPoint, then you can have the script separately, which is given on a separate link. Finally, the website does actually give you some local Warrandyte information. It gives you the local temperature. It gives you as you can see on the left-hand side, it gives you the fire rating that you might see for the next 4 days. It gives you links to the CFA and to the other emergency services. And it also gives you the 4 cameras which are located in Research Road and Kangaroo Ground Road if you need to see what the road surface is looking like. So I do encourage you to have a look at the Community Association website. And I think that's all I have to say, Dean. So I'll leave it with you now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, so we now have the question and answers now. So we'll be looking to try to prioritize the ones that have come up the most frequently. But as I mentioned before, we'll record all the questions and we'll try to get an answer to them in time and publish them. So let's see what we can answer at the moment. Just one moment. So let me see if I can bring the Q&A up without changing slides and drastically wiping off. Okay, so we have someone from Templestowe saying that they're in Templestowe and they are renting a property and they're wondering if it's necessary to have a fire plan given that they're not in a high risk area as identified. So would anyone like to address this question?
I can if need be. Clearly, the fire plans are generally designed around those in a fire-prone area, but just because you're not in one doesn't mean that you won't be impacted. You've got 2 types of impact, which is going to be your direct flame attacks. So, for example, it might be from a house next door, from a house fire, for example. It could be from a local park that's next door that backs onto your property. So you sort of need to look at your own circumstances, but there is a general view on that. The other component is no matter where you are, you could be impacted by ember attack, i.e. Embers falling on your property, in your gutter, and as we discussed before, clearing them to make sure that they don't get up into the roof space. So look, there's no harm in doing it. You would need to take your own circumstances into account. There is no hard and fast rule, but it's good to read up on it. Have a look at your circumstances, and by all means do one, because there's absolutely no harm in doing one. The harm would be not doing one and not being prepared. So hopefully that answers that question.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm just looking to see, some have been answered along the way. We've had a number of the panelists have answered some questions as well. Let's have a look at another one. So one is asking if they can be pointed in a good direction for a good fire emergency plan template to prepare. So well, I can answer that myself. There's a number of different templates that you can obtain and they're all slightly different, but the core of them are the same. So you can have the Red Cross has an excellent one where it'll discuss earlier on about your mental state. So you know, if you're in a high stress situation, would it be possible to accidentally oversee things, and then to consider your state of mind as well as, you know, the prioritize what you need to do. So the Red Cross have one, you can obtain that online, so that way you can make backups of it and have copies of them on your phone. So instead of having a hard copy that might get displaced, the SES they direct people to viewing that one as well. The CFA have a lot of really helpful resources on their website. So even from like landscaping guides on what plants have a higher ignition point, so to help you make your gardening more fire resistant. So yeah, CFA, and then I believe even the Warrandyte Community Association have developed their own. So there are places that you can go through it step for step, make that plan, and it's very important that everyone within the family or in your household is familiar with it. So that way, if an emergency does happen, everyone's on point, have the same plan. And it's good to share because one of the residents I've spoken to in my time was advised that he's the only person that's aware of the plan. So if he can't get back from work in the middle of an emergency, so being locked out of the situation instead of just trying to evacuate and being locked in, he was worrying that his family wouldn't know the plan. So it's very important to discuss that plan and, if possible, to share that with your neighbours and have a good community cohesion with that. Okay, let's have another looking at one. We have someone asking about pets, if they can bring pets to our emergency relief centre. So again, that was mentioned, it's good to have an animal plan, have a plan for your animals as well. Would anyone, maybe Ben or Stuart, like to discuss about having planning for animals, or someone else?
I can speak to that, Dean, if you like.
Yep.
And then maybe Stewie top me up if I need it. So yes, in short, we recognise that pets are family members, and therefore are welcome to an emergency relief centre. The emergency management team works closely with our animal management team. They sit within local laws to ensure that our emergency relief centre plans have appropriate arrangements in place for the storage of animals. I would advise that those with pets to consider them in their emergency plan to ensure that they have suitable food and animal carriage options as well as part of their emergency kit. I'll leave that there.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I agree with what Ben's saying about the planning. You need to factor them into your plan, because if you're away on a hot day and you've gone down to the beach and a fire starts in Warrandyte, you may not be able to get back into the area. There may be traffic management points in place. You need to have a plan for your pet. Similarly too, if we had all the people who own horses in Manningham decide to descend on the relief centre with their floats, we would have chaos. So that's also part of the plan. And members of the South Warrandyte CFA actually have a lot of good information about planning for large animals and what you can do with those sorts of things. But ultimately, it's about relationships and talking to people where you can plan in an emergency, you can take your pet to safety.
Thank you. Around emergency relief centres, how soon would one be opened if an emergency event was to occur? What would normally be the response time from Council and Victoria Police in that?
Again, I guess I'll answer this one.
Yep.
Yeah, it all depends on the emergency, and that's exactly it. Look, we are, the minute an incident occurs, we are all talking, we are all planning, we have numerous things going on in the background. It's not just a matter of people putting water on a fire. There's a lot of conversations going. So as a fire escalates, for example, there's a lot of planning already in place about setting things up. And that's where being aware of messages that are coming out, looking at a lot of the apps that are around, you'll get timely information about what we can and can't do. Obviously, you know, it is an emergency, but and things take a little time to set up. But those plans, like I've already said, are in the background, just waiting to be acted.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and you can't really, yeah, just as Stuart is saying, you can't really place a specific time on opening, but guaranteed that, you know, council will work as hard as it can to ensure that the resources needed for an emergency relief centre are pulled together as soon as possible. And so, yeah, just as Stuart's saying, you know, we start those talks quite early on, and as those talks start to happen, we can build our readiness. So it will be as soon as possible after an event, but obviously once a decision has come from higher up in that incident management chain.
Excellent. We've got someone wants to know, like, how does emergency services communicate with the community during an emergency? So that could be any number of service members we have. Is there anyone who'd like to answer that question?
I can take it if need be.
Yep.
So obviously I can't speak for other emergencies other than fire, but in the event of an emergency in terms of a bushfire, we do ask that notices be given out to residents, but you cannot rely on these. And the reason I say that is because by the time it goes through the chain of command and through essentially to the communication agency, and whether it's a phone alert where your phone rings, you pick up and there's an automated message, or whether it is a text message, it does take time for those services to work. So please don't rely on them. If you're talking about more the relief centres or anything like that, I'd need to defer that to someone else, but I'm just referring to the notification that there's, for example, a fire in the area. The other thing you can do, which is a lot more timely, is the Fire Ready app. If you want to download that, that will obviously give you a bit more timely information. It won't give you much. Really, you just need to be keeping your eyes and ears open, and your nose as well, on those types of days that you have concerns. That's probably about all I can cover in that, but I'll defer to the others about relief centres, etc., and that communication.
Okay, so we've got someone else wanting to know a little bit more. I know Stuart mentioned about emergency relief centres, but what one would actually look like inside. I can speak because I've served in emergency service and council. So emergency relief centres could potentially be a sporting centre or other location that's been allocated on standby. So it'll be a collection of tables with agency representatives. But as Stuart said, it won't be something that will have like multiple rooms where people have privacy. It's very just put together on the spot, where you'll have tables, and we'll have logistics officers there if you need like phone chargers or medication, that'll try to attend to everybody and address everyone's need as it comes up. But with emergency relief centres, it's ideally if you can leave early and avoid having to be in one would be best. So, but to say it's nothing too fancy, to put it that way. Would anyone like to add to that?
Something that I'd like to plug there, Dean, is in response to, I guess, adding to Aaron's area, is around the Vic Emergency app, which is an EMV produced, or Emergency Management Victoria produced application that not only just covers fire, but looks at all other types of emergencies and disasters as well, and also includes information on there around the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So yeah, it's worth just having those on you, signing up to them. You can highlight an area where you live, and it will also send you various notifications based on where you live, where you work, and that sort of thing. So really useful to have that available as well. And in terms of council, we have quite a comprehensive communications team as well, for which they have access to the likes of social media. Social media plays quite a big part now in the emergency management and response to those as well. And so, yeah, just keep an eye on Manningham Council Facebook sites. Will always point to the source of the information, or what we term as the control agencies of that particular risk. So yeah, just keep your eye across those sorts of things, and the generic other information as well, which is around TV, radio, and others.
Cool, thank you. Oh, now that COVID's come up, someone's asking about dreaded COVID question. How does COVID-19 impact how our relief centres operated, like ran?
I guess I can answer that one. We probably don't really know, because we haven't put one up in COVID times. I guess though we do have the guidelines from the Chief Medical or Health Officer about what we can and can't do, and we would be using those, we would be putting that into use in our planning and in our execution, I guess, of what we're doing. What I would like to say on top of that, I guess, is the way we have a good emergency management team is because we have long-standing relationships. We spend a lot of time talking, cultivating relationships when there is no fire, when there is no emergency, so that when there is an emergency, these things come easily and we know who we're talking to, and we have a degree of a strong degree of trust amongst the different agencies. And that can be replicated amongst communities in neighbourhoods. You know, you speak to your neighbours, you'll get a very good idea of what's going on in your area. If you're away and you can trust your neighbours and you can have those communications, then you know what's going on too. Yes, COVID will create some complications, but I guess too, part of the planning is that if you can be where there's not a lot of people, that would be the best thing for everybody. If you can keep yourself distance, if you can plan and have somewhere to go where there's not going to be a large congregation of people, that would be brilliant in looking after or minimising the risk of COVID virus.
Thank you.
Yep.
We've got.
And I'll add to that, and you know, where possible, relief services would be delivered remotely, and we'd only look to open an ERC where absolutely necessary, and that's obviously based on the COVID risk at the time. But a lot of it is about ensuring that our ERCs, or our emergency relief centres, are adhering to those distancing measures. We're complying with those COVID safe practices, particularly considering the vulnerable and the at-risk people who may need that sort of help. Now, what Stuart alluded to it, the state bulletin, it provided some information to us which actually adjusted the capacity of our emergency relief centres, and so we've gone away, we've taken that advice on board, and we've actually looked at adjusting the capacity of our predetermined emergency relief centres, and also ensuring that we have a high level of PPE, personal protective equipment, and face masks for distribution if needed, and working closely with the Department of Health and Human Services on that. And I think that pretty much covers that.
Thank you. Now, this one I'm pretty sure would be directed for the State Emergency Service. Someone's just asking if a tree was to fall on a property, on power lines and damage a home, who should I contact?
Yeah, so if it does involve power lines, most importantly is to contact your power company. So that's the people that run the power to your house, not the retailer, but they should put you through, but it's the people that run the power lines. It's okay also to call 132500, which is the phone number to contact SES, because that will log it and it will make its way to the power company. So we may come and assist them once the power is clear and made safe. But often we find that the power companies will come and do the work, disconnect the power and get the tree to a safe place. So suggest the power company initially, but it's fine to call 132500 if you need to and having struggling, and engage SES to attend.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, Dean, if I can just add to that, if there's an immediate risk to life or property, please call 000 as well, because that will come through to the fire brigade. That's obviously a concern for us. If there's no immediate risk to life or property, Vincent's all over it, so follow his advice.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few questions around, maybe for Chris to answer, but they're quite long in length. Someone's asking about parking in Pound Bend, saying that there's some illegal fires and cars parked illegally. Would that be something that Chris would like to give some information for?
Yeah, sure, happy to, Dean. Yeah, firstly, around any issues after hours, it says there that you've contacted 000. That's, you know, we have regular patrols of sites. You know, we can't be everywhere at once, unfortunately. And on days of higher fire danger, we increase patrols of, you know, visitor nodes and so on. I think if you witness something that you're concerned about, I'd be calling 000 and referring it to probably police. If it's a legal fire, then I'd be referring to the fire agencies as well, and getting them to respond. We don't have a response capability out of hours at, you know, on a park level. So that'd be my recommendation. It's regarding the Pound Bend and its its closure. It's something that Ben Middleton spoke about, the municipal fire and emergency management planning committees. We're collaboratively working on getting the best outcome for this change. In the short term, it will, it probably will push some traffic out onto the surrounding roads, but with the assistance of Victoria Police and local government compliance officers to ensure that we have access in and out for appliances if we need to. Unfortunately, Pound Bend is listed as one of Melbourne's top swimming spots on a number of random websites. If you put in Google, what's the best swimming spot on a hot day, you get Pound Bend. So often that congestion is not from locals, as you're probably aware, and it's from Melburnians coming out and looking for a nice spot to swim. But we're actually trying to dissuade the public from visiting high risk areas on high risk days. So hence the closure of the Pound. It may take a couple of years for it to get around. We're doing our best. We're looking at all the Tourism Victoria and using all our websites and so on. So there will be an educational program for it to get the message across, I suppose. But in the meantime, I guess with the couple of long weekends that we had in a row, the grand final and the cup weekend, and with the 25 kilometre Ring of Steel or Iron Curtain or whatever you want to call it, everyone wanted to go somewhere, and we had some warm days, and all of our visitor nodes were chock-a-block. Plenty Gorge was packed. The parks down on the peninsula were just absolutely packed. And Pound Bend was no different. And it was really one out of the box that was out of the norm, because people couldn't go away for long weekends on holidays as they normally would. So we don't expect it to be as busy moving forward, but it will have implications. We'll have people out on site, talking to people. We're getting a variable message board at the entrance to the Pound saying this is coming. That should be there shortly. It's a process. It's it's not going to won't happen overnight, but it will happen, and we're working to minimise the impact on the surrounding residents.
Thank you very much. We have a question that says, it may be our last one because we're 8:57. We're concluding at 9. Is Manningham engaging with neighbouring councils in a holistic approach for fire risk? So, Ben, would you potentially like to address this?
Yeah, so there is forums and committees for which we're part of. In terms of councils in particular, in our efforts, we collaborate together as an eastern region. That's classed as the Eastern Metropolitan Council's Emergency Management Partnership. So we work with the likes of Yarra Ranges, Nillumbik, Knox City Council and others. There's also a Eastern Region Fire Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of our REMPC, is Regional Emergency Management Planning Committee, and there's a lot that gets talked about in that space. And so if you go online, there's multiple PDF information as well from DELP, from CFA, that just talks to some of that. So and I think that group is headed up by the CFA there as well. So yes, we do. It's obvious that the risk is not just within Manningham, and in fact the risk specific to Manningham sort of comes from the northeast there over at Nillumbik. So we work closely with Nillumbik in that space.
Cool. Okay, so I would like to thank everyone for coming this evening and giving us your time. I really appreciate it, and I would love to thank all the speakers. We have Aaron from the Wonga Park who's just donating his own personal time. Same with Vincent, and then from Fire Rescue Victoria we have Steve, Stuart from Victoria Police, Ben, and then Chris from Forest Fire Management Victoria. So I'd really like to thank all the speakers who have given their time this evening as well. And as we've mentioned, if there's any questions that you would like to raise, we have on Manningham Your Say. So that's what we normally do, like surveys and question to, as like a tool to keep an open dialogue with the community. We have an emergency aware page there, so you can ask any additional questions if you'd like, and we can answer them there. And we'll also have a survey on there for tonight's evening to simply say what information you found useful, what would you like to hear more about. So if you go to Manningham Your Say, you'll be able to find an emergency aware page link there, and then you'll be able to continue the information that we've been discussing tonight, and yeah, keep it an ongoing dialogue with our community. So thank you everyone for coming this evening. I really appreciate it. Thank you.